It is Friday, February 7th, and let's talk about our love for the game. And welcome into the Love for the Game podcast. I'm your host, Reed Napper. We have a jam-packed show for you today on everything college football. Our topics today: a new tampering enforcement system for the NCAA, Brian Hartline hired as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Following that, an extension for Ryan Day at Ohio State following the national championship win, and a full reaction to National Signing Day of 2025. Welcome in again. This is the Love for a Game podcast with your host, Reed Napper. Follow us on all socials, X, Instagram, and TikTok at LFTGpod01. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate all feedback. And thank you again for listening. So, to begin today's show, a new tampering enforcement has come down for the NCAA by a bunch of their member institutions. This first came out from a report by Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports. And it basically goes into talking about how a meeting was held in Washington, D.C., a 2-day summit. And it talks about a transition team of sorts charged with overseeing concepts of the House settlement that inched closer to establishing a new structure to oversee, manage, and enforce the settlement-related athletes' compensation system for all of NCAA Division I. And this new created LLC, overseen by a CEO and executive director, will be centered as a new enforcement arm to police violators of the industry's new salary cap and is expected to feature revenue sharing policies and a corresponding penalty structures for violators. Now, will this actually be taken into effect? We don't know. They just had initial meetings in Washington, D.C. over the last weeks. And this could be huge, for college football and college sports forward. It could be big as member institutions will oversee all NIL and abilities to make money for these players and athletes instead of outside sources coming in to overlook their NIL doings. Now, I think this is huge. I think this is needed. These athletes go to outside resources, they have agents and everything. And I think it would be better for the member institutions to have, more structure, more say over what their athletes and players are doing and what deals they're getting associated with. Now, under this new model, schools would share approximately up to $20 million annually with their athletes, and the distribution is expected to be allocated 75 to 85% to the football players, 10 to 15% to men's basketball, and the remaining 10 to 15% to all other sports. And this shift marks a departure from the NCAA's, longstanding principle of amateurism, which has prohibited direct payments to athletes. And the change comes in increasing legal and public pressure to provide fair compensation to student athletes. And, this is all speculated as of right now. They just had initial meetings. But this could definitely be a huge move in the world of college football and college sports in general as we move forward. And the settlement also addresses NIL entirely. Athletes could profit from NIL through third-party agreements, as I said before, and be facilitated by collectives. And within this new model, schools will oversee these deals, ensuring they reflect the fair market value and comply with NCAA regulations. Now, this new party that would be enforced by this transition team as an enforcement arm, per Ross Dellinger, there would basically be penalties for anyone who doesn't abide by these rules, and doesn't comply with NCAA rules. They're actually going to follow their own rules, which I think is huge. And lawsuits could happen, suspensions. It's not the old saying of, oh, well, it's just a slap on the wrist and we'll just get, a couple vacated wins, maybe some recruiting violations, some recruiting restrictions. There definitely could be, vacated wins and stuff like that. It's not like that at all anymore. They're actually implementing suspensions, not just for coaches and players, but for school officials and stuff like that, So I believe that this is a huge, huge step forward for NIL and college athletics in general. And I do believe that the power conferences that have stepped in to oversee this rev share system is huge. And thank you again to Ross Dellinger for posting this article, because this had been kept under wraps for, it seems like, weeks now. They just met in Washington, D.C. out of the blue, it seems like. So this is definitely big. I think this story has gone under the radar. And thank you again to Ross Dellinger for putting out this story. Now, on to our second topic of the episode. Brian Hartline, hired as offensive coordinator at Ohio State. This is coming off the back of the national championship win and Chip Kelly leaving Ohio State to go to the NFL for the Las Vegas Raiders to be their offensive coordinator. And Brian Hartline has been the wide receiver coach there at Ohio State now for a few years. He's been known as a wonderful recruiter over the past couple seasons and has coached some of the best wide receivers in college football that are currently in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Currently has Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka was just there. Cardinal Tate is coming back. Brandon Ennis. So he definitely has some weapons to use going into this next season with Ohio State. And he completely is an understudy to Ryan Day. He's been the assistant there the last couple seasons and has been given full play calling rights by Ryan Day, which Chip Kelly also had and obviously led to a national championship for Ohio State. So I think it's definitely important that Brian Hartline quickly gets up to speed calling plays and has Ryan Day right by his side. If he needs any assistance or any help, he can just go right down the hall to Ryan Day's office. And we all know that Ryan Day has the capability to take over the play calling if it does get to a point that he feels uncomfortable with Brian Hartline behind the wheel. So I think this is a good move. He definitely deserves it with what he's already brought to the program and the players he's brought in. And I'm very interested now with the offensive system he's going to run and the weapons he's able to utilize to try to find success for Ohio State. Ryan Day extended at Ohio State. He will earn $12.5 million over the next 7 years, which will total out to a whopping $87.5 million. Now, winning the national title is obviously amazing. The first of his career, the first in 10 years for Ohio State since they first won the national championship in the 14 playoff. And this just shows that Ohio State's higher ups are okay with going forward with him. There's been scrutiny over the last 4 seasons. They've lost to Michigan every season, couldn't get over the hump in the playoff. Had time and time again, arguably the best roster in college football. And they go out and pay $20 million allegedly for the roster that they had this past season, and they finally get it done. He finally wins the national championship for Ohio State, but the looming head of Michigan is still over him. And as the matchups are just going to start getting tougher and tougher with the team up north going forward, number 6 class, as we'll discuss in a little bit, number 6 class in the 2025 cycle, Bryce Underwood, 5-star quarterback coming into Michigan. Those matchups with Michigan aren't going to get any easier. And Sharon Moore has built something great at Michigan, and I'm curious to see if Ryan Day will be able to translate this contract and success from this season going forward against Michigan, Penn State, as he has in the past. Will he be able to bounce back against Oregon in the regular season as he did in the playoff? Will he continue to be the gold standard in the Big Ten? Will he continue to be able to build rosters going forward as he has in the past? And I think his job up to this point is granted, and he deserves this contract extension. Now, if you're an Ohio State fan and you don't believe in Ryan Day as of yet, I don't know what you're watching. I don't know what you're looking at, honestly. I believe he's fully deserved. He is fully capable of being the head coach at Ohio State for the foreseeable future. Obviously, with this contract, he will be there for the foreseeable future. So definitely granted. Definitely deserved for Ryan Day. Now, into our final topic of the episode, we have a full National Signing Day reaction. National Signing Day wrapped up on Wednesday, our first episode. Go check it out. And the 2025 recruiting class is finalized. Texas claims the top spot. They are the kings of this last cycle. Some key signings for Texas coming in. 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry out of Georgia. 5-star safety Jonah Williams out of Texas. A 5-star edge rusher Lance Jackson out of Texas. 5-star wide receiver Khalil Lockett out of Texas. And 5-star cornerback Cade Phillips out of Texas. Sarkisian coming in with the number 1 class this season. That's just him doing what he does best, you know. He poaches Justice Terry, a 5-star D lineman, out of the state of Georgia, preventing Georgia from get them, which already is boosting a stout defense, you know. And they also had Jonah Williams, a 5-star safety, a 5-star edge rusher, and Lance Jackson, and a 5-star cornerback in Cade Phillips. So they're just retooling on what already was a fantastic defense from last season, you know, getting to the college football playoff semifinals, being a competitor for the SEC title. And they're going to be young. They're going to be a very young defense, you know, bringing in 4 or 5-star freshmen that have the chance to make an immediate impact. But their talented receivers already on the offensive side and bringing in a few wide receivers that definitely can make an immediate impact will also be great for Arch Manning as he takes over the reins as full-time quarterback there for Texas. So great job by Steve Sarkisian. Justice Terry is definitely the notable staff. Georgia, number 2. Some key signings there. 5-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin, who was the number 1 D lineman in the country. 5-star edge rusher Isaiah Gibson, who was the number 1 edge rusher in the country. 5-star wide receiver Talon Taylor. 5-star linebacker Zayden Walker, who is the number 1 linebacker in the country. And 4-star tight end Elias Williams, who is the number 1 tight end in the country. Now, Kirby Smart definitely still hanging around. You know, Georgia is not going anywhere even after the season that they had, the lackluster season for their standards. Losing Carson Beck to injury before the playoffs, having to go with Gunnar Stockton, led the country in drops. You know, I think it's great they're bringing in a 5-star receiver and a 4-star tight end who happened to be the number 1 tight end in the class. Definitely can both make an immediate impact there for Georgia. And Kirby's not going anywhere. The Dogs aren't going anywhere. These players coming in again will make an immediate impact, and I believe these receivers, that they are bringing in, and this top tight end can definitely boost and help out Gunnar Stockton or whoever happens to be the starting quarterback for Georgia next season, who happen to lead the country in drops. So they definitely need help on the outside, and I think it's a great job by Georgia once again and Kirby Smart. Alabama at number 3. This just proves that DeBoer can hang around with the SEC Giants, you know, and he didn't just do it in the South. You know, he got 5-star quarterback Keelan Russell from Texas, 4-star safety Ivan Taylor from Florida. He went around the country. He got a 5-star cornerback Dijon Lee from California, 4-star offensive tackle Jackson Lloyd from California, and a 5-star offensive lineman Michael Carroll from here in Pennsylvania. DeBoer will be back this season. Alabama will be back, I believe, to greater heights. Now, we'll see who happens to be the starting quarterback. It's definitely a discussion and a debate that's going to be had throughout the offseason, going into spring ball and winter lifts and stuff like that. But I think the ability for DeBoer to go around the country and be able to pick up the 3rd overall class is huge. Obviously, filling the shoes of Nick Saban is not easy to do, but he's able to replicate a similar recruiting class to Nick Saban. And I believe Alabama will take the next step under DeBoer coming into next season. And this recruiting class is just the next step for him. A big surprise to me personally, Michigan at number 6. Now, they were at number 9 heading into Wednesday, but the signing of 4-star offensive tackle Ty Haywood out of Texas jumped them to number 6. They have another 5-star offensive tackle, Andrew Babaloa, excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, out of Kansas, to be on both sides of Bryce Underwood, the 5-star freshman quarterback from the state of Michigan. Originally wasn't signed there, and he flipped to Michigan for Bryce to come in with 2 offensive tackles that he will be there the whole time with. He'll be able to understand them. They'll be able to understand him and his movements around the pocket and stuff like that. I think it's great. that they're building around Bryce Underwood. And as soon as they got him, to get Ty Haywood as well to put on the opposite side of Andrew Babaloa is great. They also got 4-star edge rusher Nate Marshall out of Illinois. And Michigan bumping from 9 to 6 just based off one signing from Ty Haywood, I think is massive. It just shows Sharon Moore in his first full cycle as head coach is able to go and land 2 stud offensive tackles and the best quarterback and player in the class. It just shows that Sharon Moore is not messing around. He wants to keep beating Ohio State. He wants to be back at the top of the Big Ten and the college football playoff landscape. The future is bright for the Maize and Blue. I hate to say it, but Michigan might be back next season, low key. Sharon Moore's done a fantastic job so far, and they arguably have the most momentum coming into this next season of any team in the country, beating Ohio State, who ended up winning the national championship, beating Alabama in the bowl game that they had, coming in with the number 6 class of 2025. They arguably have the most momentum coming into next season. So it's a great job by Sharon Moore and that staff up in Ann Arbor. Some other surprises for me personally, Auburn, number 8, they kind of came out of nowhere. And I personally think with this recruiting class that they come in, some of the transfer acquisitions that they've had, Eric Singleton, Jackson Arnold at quarterback, they definitely could be a sneaky team in the SEC. I'm going to say I'm not going to pick them to win the conference or anything. Don't even get me wrong. That's a complete long shot. But to have the turnover from last season to the roster that they have this season, I definitely think they'll be improved. And I'm just saying they could be a sneaky team in the SEC this upcoming season. That's all I'm going to say. Also, 5-star quarterback Deuce Knight, who flipped from Notre Dame, I believe could sit behind Jackson Arnold, who's the more experienced quarterback, who's the most experienced quarterback on that roster, and be able to sit behind him for a season. I think could be massive for Deuce Knight, and he could be immense in two seasons when he gets the starting job, I believe. So surprised by Auburn at number 8. Florida at number 11, just outside the top 10, but they definitely had a top 10 caliber class. They also have a lot of momentum coming in to 2025. You know, a couple ranked wins at the end of last season. Ole Miss and LSU beat who'd they play? Tulane, I believe, in their bowl game. Won their bowl game. To finish with the number 11 class, Billy Napier seems to be fully back. DJ Lagway coming back at quarterback is massive as well. So can these signees from this 2025 class be able to boost Florida through their insane schedule that they have coming up in 2025? Arguably the hardest in the country once again. So Florida coming in at number 11, great job by them. Really expect a lot out of the Gators this coming season from DJ Lagway and Billy Napier. And finally, USC coming in to round out the top 15 after losing the Branch brothers and other players to the portal in the offseason and the lackluster season in general for the Trojans. Lincoln Riley is retooling the Trojans, you know, trying to get more of his players back in there and not just relying on the transfer portal and not worrying too much about players leaving. You know, he wants the guys, obviously, that want to be there and want to be in that building. So I think it's a great job by Lincoln Riley retooling his roster and trying to come back in 2025 better than ever. So that is our full National Signing Day recap. And that is our episode for today. I really appreciate you all joining us today for this episode of Love for the Game. We will be back next week. I really appreciate you all listening. Remember to follow us on X, Instagram, and TikTok at LFTGpod01. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.